We're often talking about governance, but like that's not a word that real people use. So, what is governance?
Yeah. I hope people haven't fallen asleep.
Yeah. Welcome back to the next episode of the Family Wealth Edge. Today, we're diving into a word that you hear a lot in our work, the word governance. And Vincent was one of the first people to really get me thinking about what in the world does that mean and why are we always talking about it? Because honestly, anytime we're doing work with a family, we're often talking about governance, but like that's not a word that real people use. So, what is governance?
Yeah. I hope people haven't fallen asleep. As
Yeah, it's a sleeper.
what and it is the buzzword, I think, in our industry, Kristen. Governance. Years ago, one of the courses I took up here in Canada really defined governance simply as communication and decision making. And there was some ruffled people in the room, like, well, no, it's got to be broader or more sophisticated than that. In the years, I want to add this little piece to it. One of my colleagues, I know we dropped some names on this on our show here, but a dear friend of mine, Matt Fulbrook, who's been a corporate board governance guru for 20 years in Canada, has an addition to that
Okay.
communication and decision making definition. And
Mhm.
he added, and I'm reading because I want to get it right, paraphrasing: good governance is cultivating effective conditions for decision making,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Cultivating effective conditions for decision making, which is, I guess, it's a drill down into that communication piece.
Mhm.
So I'll just pause there and
Yeah.
you reflect on that, Kristen.
I like the idea of it being tied to certain conditions because really, I think you can take out the communication piece of what you were saying before and say
Mm,
that communication is one of the conditions that can bring a sense of good decision making. And really, I
yes.
mean, if I can get even more informal, I think of governance as how you do what you do. And so for families, they have governance. They might not think of it as
Hmm.
governance, but
Yeah.
when their approach to communication and decision making is like, as you're passing each other in the hallway, talk about this, that, or the other thing versus having a family meeting. That is governance. That's your way of doing
Yeah.
governance. That's how you do what you do. Maybe not effective. And
Yeah.
maybe there's an opportunity to like formalize some of what you're doing. But I think the key piece being really how can you build a system for doing what you're doing in a way that is going to work for you and not feel too
Yeah.
formal or all of that. So,
Well, and I love what you said, work for you, right? Because families come in all different shapes and sizes. And so too does the complexity that they're dealing with and the people that they're dealing with. What I have found, I think you may agree, is that because this word is so prevalent now in the work, people they over govern, right?
mm-hmm.
So you have a smaller family. I'm working with a family, there's 5 people, right? And there's the wealth, forget about the number of wealth, but there's 5 people, and they're looking at implementing really structured and too complex governance structures
Mm-hmm.
that may not actually work for them because somewhere along the way they learned or heard that you need governance. What's been your experience with that, with families maybe going too
Yeah.
far on
Yeah. I
that?
was going to ask you, what's the risk of that, do you think? In
Yeah.
my mind, the risk is they build all of this and put it on the shelf and then they don't actually utilize it because it didn't fit them. It was too strict,
Yeah. Too
didn't fit their culture.
cumbersome.
Yeah. What do you think
I
the
find
risks
it
are of that?
too cumbersome.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
think we have to meet, and this is where boards, and I know you sit on a few boards,
Mm-hmm.
this is where I think boards get a little sideways too. Like
Mm-hmm.
we start to get into, but then in our world, in the family enterprise world, you try to bring too much rigor into a family setting that they may not
Right.
be accustomed to.
Right.
You're just gonna you're literally gonna turn them off, right?
And it
Like,
takes six people to change the light bulb then at that point because you put in so much layer of structure that it doesn't start to feel like it's agile anymore. I think that that's a risk as well.
and I love what you said, doing what you do.
Yeah.
So we have to really figure out, and this is where our work is fascinating and challenging all in the same day, is that one governance tool or method we use for family A may probably not work for family B because
Mm-hmm.
of the personalities around the table.
Yeah.
Some families appreciate structure and rules that they're governed by, and other families are much more relaxed and have a different social style with each other. So I think and that's the
Sweet
beauty of
spot.
the work. Yeah,
Finding the sweet spot, because I think that families in general, certainly, G1, G2, G3, can sometimes err too far on the side of informality. And so, a lot of the work that we do is asking people, what are the roles inside of your family enterprise? And they have to stop and think, like, I don't know, we all just do what needs doing. Well, it's
yeah,
helpful to understand what the roles are, and especially as the next generation is coming into where they can start to participate in those roles, to try to codify some of that so that it's not reinventing the wheel every time to say, what would it take to be in that role? What are some of the qualifications? What are some of the preparation steps that you need to be in that role? To kind of think through some of that can be really helpful, because often, certainly the first generation, sometimes the second generation doesn't need a lot of formality in understanding what
yeah,
the roles are, because they're just putting their heads down and trying to make
yeah,
it work. But then when you get into now cousins are sharing these roles, it's definitely time to get a clearer sense of who's doing what and how we're going to communicate
yeah.
with each other.
I'm smiling because, oddly enough, while you were speaking, the thing that came to my mind was governance needs to fit like a good shoe. Right? It needs to fit well for your family enterprise. It
Yeah.
really does, right? So I don't know why, but that's what it needs to fit and work for your family circumstance.
Yeah.
I think one of the overarching um, themes
Yeah.
that we're talking about.
I'm thinking about my dad's shoe, which was, I think, a size 14 or something like that. So
Yeah,
again, across generations, sometimes you're
yeah,
like, this shoe doesn't fit. I've got to figure out how
yeah.
to find a shoe that fits.
I was playing with the analogy. It doesn't say, it didn't say it was working. The other thing too that what's become very prevalent, and I guess much more talked about in our circles and with the families we work with, is there's two pillars of governance, two areas of focus. There's the enterprise side or the wealth side. It's primarily the focus of wealth management industry, right? The
Mhm.
governance of the company, shareholders agreements, all that technical legal stuff. And then what's been really rising up, where I think where we spend most of our time, is on that family pillar, that family
Mhm.
governance piece. And without getting into, we can if you want, but I think the messaging, at least from where I sit, is both pillars need love and attention,
Mhm.
right? A lot of families, for a lot of the good reasons, have over focused on the wealth and the enterprise side, and have
Mhm.
often left or neglected the intentional work and
Yeah.
focus that the family needs.
Mhm. So it is governance, like you're saying. Like, I think it's just as much governance. You want to have a mission statement and a value statement. You feel like you checked all the boxes, but it's just as important from the standpoint of governance to make sure that you have developed a way to stay connected across branches and across
Yeah,
generations, so that you can know what's new and where Sally is going to move to, and who's going to college where, and what major they chose, and how you can stay connected with each other. How you're going to do all of that is just as important, maybe more important, and that is governance, but we don't think of it that way.
yeah. Final thoughts, Kristen. You're on a roll there.
um, I don't know if we all have a takeaway. I think take the word governance, toss it aside. That can feel really intimidating. And
Yeah,
just think about how, as a family, you want to do this work that you're doing together, be it philanthropy or a business or sharing wealth together or making decisions about it. How do we want to do what we're going to do? What can we take from the previous generation to help us because it's really working? What can we modify because we have some new factors at play that we need to adapt,
yeah.
and set up a governance that's going to work for you?
Practice does make perfect, right? So to your point, Kristen, as families are looking at implementing these governance structures, learning about it, recognize, like all good things in life, things take time. And what I often we see with families is that if they don't get it right the first go around, there's like a sense of like, we can't do this. And to
Mm,
think that it's going to happen, good governance, again, strong communication, effective decision making, to add to Matt, cultivating conditions for
yeah.
effective decision making. There's going to be a number of iterations
Hmm.
before the family gets it right.
Yeah.
I love what you said, right? It's really about what works for you and what works for the individuals in the family.
Hmm.
So, with,
Patience.
go ahead.
Yeah, that requires
Yeah.
patience. I'm thinking, to cultivate those conditions can take a while. So it's not an overnight thing. You go phase one, phase two, and eventually you're going to get it right.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us. Another episode of Family Wealth Edge. We talked good governance and what does it actually mean today?